we are here to listen to a very learned scholar who has worked both in India and Sri Lanka about these areas. And Professor Surya Narayan, with an old friend of Sri Lanka, and has worked so tremendously on various especially sensitive political areas of Sri Lanka and India, and especially South India. And he's been decorated in various universities, extending all the way for international universities, Sri Lanka, India, and elsewhere in the world. And he's also currently the Nelson Mandela Professor of Afro-Asian Studies at the Mahatma Gandhi University in Kottayam. And also he's a person who has tremendously contributed to learned journals, and many books he has both edited and authored on various topics. Just to put you on the picture, apart from the fact that there is a kind of, not apathy, a kind of ignorance also about this issue, I'd like to place this issue on a broader canvas. One has to understand this not as a simple issue about fishermen. This issue has to be placed on a broader canvas, and also multi-scenarios and the dialectic of its own making. If you take scenario one has to understand the landscape and seascape associated with the pork strait. I'm not sure whether many people know about the importance of this small region. Historically, this area, as an archaeologist, I know how we looked at the artifacts extending all the way from the prehistoric period on both sides of the divide, connecting both regions. Very important. You go to the early period of the Stone Age. Then early Iron Age, around 1000 BC, you have this connectivity intensifying. And what we call the Shangam period, you have very intensive connectivity. And if you read the Shangam text actually about the Tinai concept, the littoral is a very critical landscape. It is both with land and sea, how the livelihood is connected. And looking at the early inscriptions of those areas, if you are looking at the Paradavar community in South India, who actually crossed and they actually became Buddhist monks, they were merchants, traders who were interacting in both areas. So I'm just trying to point out the importance of this region and how it was a shared region by people who didn't have the kind of modern trappings of divisions. Now there's sort of, if you really look at the three major changes that emerged, what Suri will probably point out is the post-colonial territoriality based on political entities. That is about legitimacy and spatial factors. I mean, now it's sort of coming out to its open, especially in the post-colonial period, the drawing of the boundaries, the territorial boundaries, international boundaries. Number two is another scenario which emerged with the civil war in Sri Lanka, which is a carnage actually for 30 years. We all suffered, irrespective of whether it was Sinhala speaking or Tamil speaking or whoever it was. And the ramifications on movements, often looking at alternative routes and logistics. So this is very interesting how the seascape was looked, especially during this war, and there was a kind of a readjustment of this sea and the landscape. Number three, post-war intensification of new modes of production associated with mechanization, bottom trawling, and resource attraction, largely challenging the hegemony over resources and status quo of political boundaries. Now, this is exactly where we are. I'm just pointing out these issues that Suri will be elaborating. Now, you have the macro trajectory, which is the central government of India, the state government of Tamil Nadu, and you have Sri Lanka. the state of Sri Lanka. Then if you go into the micro trajectory, it's very interesting. You have dynamics between the center and Tamil Nadu, which has to be considered for various political reasons, how you sort of have various deals or whatever that is has to be taken up. You have Tamil Nadu and its fishermen, the Tamil Nadu government and the fishermen. You have the Sri Lankan government and provincial council in Sri Lanka, the provincial government. You have the Sri Lanka government and its fishermen, which is another issue. Then you have the Sri Lankan fishermen and Tamil Nadu fishermen. Now these are the players and all the stakeholders in this thing. Now the underlying reality of this, the conflict areas we have to identify. You have to have the ecological ramifications looked at. This is the most serious thing that is going on due to bottom trawling. And finally, the poor fishermen as the victims in this whole thing. And finally, how are we going to work towards a new dialogue? So with those questions, I don't have the answers, ladies and gentlemen, but as an academic myself rather than a diplomat, we'd like to ask this question and leave it to the audience. And I'm very pleased to present Surya Narayan. Thank you.
Ambassador Sudarshan Senivaratne, Professor Sudarshan Senivaratne, and friends, may at the outset express my deep sense of appreciation to the India International Center for inviting me to come here this evening and share some of my thoughts with you. Fishermen throughout the world are no respecters of maritime boundaries, and wherever there is fish, they go. The maritime boundary, as Sudarshan mentioned, is a post-independent creation. And even after the agreement was signed between, it did not affect the fishermen. They continued with this. So the dilemma arises because of the symbiotic relationship between fisherfolk and the sea. The name for fishermen in Tamil is Mukkuvar. Mukku means land's end. And since they were living in the land's end, they are known as Mukkuvars. I shall try to explain this problem in the manner in which I started working on this problem. India has signed bilateral maritime agreements with several countries, with Pakistan, with Maldives, with Sri Lanka, with Indonesia, with Thailand, with Myanmar, with Bangladesh. And however wrong the maritime boundary agreements have been, there is a legal sanctity of it. So we went to war with Pakistan several times, but the Indus Water Agreement was not abrogated. So abrogation of the maritime boundary agreement is not a solution. So how can the interests of the fishermen of India and Sri Lanka be fostered, protected, and promoted without abrogating the maritime boundary agreement? But there are a lot of indirect sources which confirm that the island of Kachativu was part of the Zamindari of Raja Ramnath, and the Zamindar used to enter into lease agreement with various parties for this. Now, Government of India stand was that it was part of the Zamindari of Raja Ramnath, but Zamindari does not mean sovereignty. Nobody argues that Zamindar is sovereign. The sovereign delegates the power of collecting revenue to the Zamindar, and once the Zamindari is abolished, it becomes a part of India. Now, if Zamindari does not mean part of the Indian unity, at the time of independence, about 75% of the land in India was either under the Zamindari or Mahalwari or Raitwari system. So if you say that Zamindari does not mean sovereignty, even the Indian unity is at stake. So that is one aspect of it. The second one is that the island, the ownership of the island, that is giving away to Sri Lanka, was mainly decided by the friendship between Srimao Bandaranaike and Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. So the Government of India took the stand that is a disputed territory, and in the process of delimitation, the island falls on the Sri Lankan side. Now, when you delimit the maritime boundary, generally the principle of median line is applied. But in this case, what happened, according to Jagota, who was at that time the Director of Legal and Treaty Division, the principle of median line was applied, but when he came to Kachativu, a deviation was made so the island could fall on the Sri Lankan side. So it was personal friendship between the two prime ministers. Now, even though the island was given, the Article 4 and 5 of the agreement provided for continuation of the traditional fishing rights of the Indian fishermen to fish in and around Kachativu. It was mentioned as hitherto, they will enjoy the same rights as hitherto. That is the word that is used there. So a question was asked to Swaran Singh, what does the hitherto mean? So he said that they will enjoy the fishing rights as they used to have before that. Then 1976, there was another agreement which delimited the maritime boundaries in the Gulf of Mannar and the Indian Ocean, where it's in the form of exchange of letters between Keval Singh and W.T. Jayasinghe, where there is a preface which says, now we had delimited the maritime boundaries between India and Sri Lanka in all sectors. After this agreement, the Indian fishermen will fish in Indian waters and Sri Lankan fishermen will fish in Sri Lankan waters. In other words, the traditional fishing rights, which according to Swaran Singh that Indian fishermen had in the 1974 agreement, was bartered away in 1976. That is the time of the emergency, so there was no debate in the parliament, nor did the Indian fishermen go to the Supreme Court for the redressal of grievances. Because as far as the fishermen was concerned, Sri Lanka did not have much of a navy, and they could go as they liked and fish wherever they want. As Ambassador Sudarshan Seneviratne mentioned, the Parkway throughout history had been a bridge between India and Sri Lanka. There were movements of peoples, movement of ideas, and in the 19th and the 20th century, there were the Indian laborers who were taken there. And during the ethnic conflict in Sri Lanka, there was the reverse. The Sri Lankan Tamils came to India as refugees. Parkway became the conduit through which the Tamil militants got their succor, weapons and all those things. So it had always been a bridge and not a barrier. The major difficulty with the 1974 and 76 agreement is that they were state-centric. They were done by the Mandarins in the South Bloc and the Mandarins in Colombo in the name of good neighborly relations. According to their perception, what was good for India and Sri Lanka. What is required is a settlement from below. You must take the livelihood of the fishermen into consideration and evolve a settlement from below, and that is what is required. So that's why we have been encouraging the fishermen dialogue and various other things. The problem was formerly it was traditional fishermen. The Sri Lankan fishermen used to come here, our fishermen used to go there, they used to get intermarried. In fact, the Tamil Nadu, when I was doing field work in the Park Bay, they told me when there was cyclone in the Park Bay, they used to stay with the Sri Lankan Tamil fishermen for 3 or 4 days till the climate changed, fair weather came, and they used to. Such was the camaraderie between the Tamil fishermen of Sri Lanka and Tamil fishermen of Sri Lanka. In the mid-1960s, especially 1967-68, India was facing a severe foreign exchange crisis. And New Delhi wanted to earn foreign exchange and therefore promoted export industries in that. And that was the time, in order to encourage the export of fish and prawns, they introduced trawlers in the Park Bay. And which had the bottom trawlers were introduced in the Park Bay, and they used to go get, and the export of prawns went up to Japan, to European Union, and all those things. It had two consequences. One consequence was that formerly the fishermen themselves used to own the boat and used to fish. Trawlers required investment. And investment only those who have the money can invest. So non-fishermen started having the trawlers and they used to fish including some of the political leaders. So the fishermen became wage laborers. And then the second havoc with the trawlers played was that the bottom trawling plays havoc with marine ecology. Suppose if you sweep this room, there will be not even a speck of dust. Similarly, the bottom trawling took away everything from the seabed, including the seeds. As a result of which, there is absolutely no fish on the Indian side of the park beach. So what do? They go to the Sri Lankan side. And the ethnic conflict in Sri Lanka came as godsend for the trawler owners in Tamil Nadu because fishing was banned. In Sri Lanka, the fishermen were attacked, and many of the fishermen came to India as refugees. And the Sri Lankan Tamil refugees who came to Tamil Nadu, some of them worked in the trawlers, and they used to direct them, you go that side, you will get a lot of prawns. And if you look at the export figure, export goes up, but all these exports are because we were fishing on the Sri Lankan side, not because of the production on the Indian side. That's it. So this was. Now when the ceasefire came up in 2002, and the Sri Lankan Tamil fishermen wanted to start fishing, they found the presence of the Indian trawlers to be a major hindrance to their livelihood. On 3 days, Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, the fishermen are permitted to go. Around 4 o'clock, they will start their trawlers from Rameswaram. Within 5:30, they will cross the Kachativu, which is the disputed island. Once you see the Kachativu, you know that you are in Sri Lankan waters. Like a flotilla, they move. They go deep, deep, deep into the Sri Lankan waters. So this is a major hindrance for the livelihood of the Sri Lankan. And before 1983, in fact, 38% of the fishing requirements of Sri Lanka used to be supplied by the northern province. So it's a major means of livelihood as far as the Sri Lankan Tamil fishermen are concerned. The basic problem is the use of trawlers by the Indian fishermen. And the trawlers play havoc with the marine ecology. And the Sri Lankan fisherman rightly says that if trawling by the Indian fishermen continues, there will be no fish on the Sri Lankan side also. Which is a genuine fear. And trawling is banned in Sri Lanka. So our fellows are using a banned equipment in the Sri Lankan waters. From 2004 onwards, some of us got together and were encouraging, let there be a solution from below. Let the fishermen meet, because after all, their livelihood should be the center of attention. As I mentioned to you that the Sri Lankan government has got photographs of where our fishermen are. When they cross the maritime boundary, 12 night, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. and all. Photographs are there. And there are political forces in Sri Lanka which want Sri Lanka to take the case to the international court. And if it is taken to the international court, India has no defense. India and Tamil Nadu has no defense on this. But they may not take because friendship with India is extremely vital for us. The second thing is that now the TNA, the Tamil National Alliance, which is the representative organization of the Sri Lankan Tamils, which is also in power in the northern provincial government, Sumantran has introduced a resolution in parliament saying that since trawlers are banned, all trawlers which get into the Sri Lankan waters should be detained. And our fishermen are very clever. They won't even take the original license. They will take a photocopy of the license. But now they have developed Kangesandurai where the trawlers can be kept. And the Sri Lankan government during the last 6 months, especially under the earlier regime, used to capture the trawlers and used to release the fishermen because there is pressure from New Delhi. But trawlers they kept. Without the trawlers, the fishermen cannot go. The second one is that the fishermen themselves are edged by the political forces. As far as Tamil Nadu fishermen was concerned, on one meeting, they raised the issue of Kachativu. Now, Kachativu has nothing to do with the present problem because our fishermen go very deep and all those things, and the talks ended in failure. Now, according to me, the ball is in New Delhi's court. We must withdraw the trawlers at the earliest. Give 3 months' time, withdraw the trawlers, and these trawlers can be used with certain amount of modification for deep sea fishing. In deep sea fishing, you have a mother ship, then you have smaller boats which fish in and around and take the fish back to it. With certain amount of modification, the trawlers can be used for that. And deep sea fishing is a priority area as far as Tamil Nadu government is concerned. The other thing about the fishermen is that the fishermen are attached to the sea, but they are not so much attached to the land. Most of the fishermen in Rameshwaram, Sudarshan, they don't belong to Rameshwaram. They come from villages near, on the other side, Gulf of Mannar side, and then they come. Even in Negombo, the major fishing harbour in Colombo, the Sri Lankan Tamil fishermen used to come during the season and used to do. So my own plea is that the trawlers must be withdrawn, a deadline must be set, and the trawlers should be modified, and then it can be used as a mothership. Once the trawlers are out of the scene, the Park Bay will become tranquil. And every crisis we should convert into an opportunity. And I think this is an opportunity for Park Bay. Instead of a contested territory, we must make, as it was throughout history, a common heritage. I've been pleading that once the trawlers are out of the scene, a Park Bay authority should be constituted, consisting of representatives of both India and Sri Lanka. Fisheries experts, marine ecologists, environmentalists. Let the Park Bay authority decide what is the ideal sustainable catch. Let them decide what type of fishing equipments can be used. How many days can Sri Lankan fishermen fish? How many days can Indian fishermen fish? How to enrich the sea jointly. Then the Park Bay will become not a contested territory but common heritage. As far as Park Bay is concerned, as Sudarshan mentioned, and as Sudarshan knows, the borders were irrelevant throughout history. So let us try to make it irrelevant by constituting a Park Bay authority, by considering it as a common heritage and not as a contested territory. And I visualize the time when we will have a new dawn in India-Sri Lanka relations, and that depends upon the political will. Only thing academics like me can do is only to shout and to scream, sometimes with effect, but very often without any effect. I shall stop here.